Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Nightfall, Children of Eve, out May 2nd on Season of Mist. The album has 10 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this is the band's 11th full-length studio album. They are a Greek melodic Black Death metal band. As far as the design goes, this album is really simple. It has a simple, organic format to it. It doesn't really depend on a lot of extended intros, extended outros, or even interludes in order to connect the songs and to give some more consistency and cohesiveness to the overall record experience. The album does that very naturally. It does it almost in a very unassuming way, which makes the experience all around a lot better, and at the same time gives versatility to the listener in terms of how you can approach this album. If you decide to hear a song here and a song there, you're going to get the most out of those tracks. But if you decide to sit down and press play on the first track and go through it, it's going to be very hard to walk away from this record without finishing. The album has this kind of glue that keeps you connected with it because it's such an engaging album with a very engaging design, with a very simplistic approach that just minimizes all of the nuances that the record has, making a lot more approachable, a lot more palpable to the listener, and that gives great playability to the record itself. Now, once you want to talk about the sound, what can be said about it? I think the first two things that anybody listening to this record is going to say is that the album is heavy and the album is epic. I would go as far as to say the album at times sounds very theatrical, very cinematic. Now, most bands that take this kind of approach, specifically within this genre, they depend heavily on symphonic elements and orchestrations in order to do so. A lot of that size, a lot of that cinematic aroma that the songs will have, a lot of that theatrical aspect that the album puts forward really comes from that element or from a combination of those elements, either be symphonic elements or really deep, well-driven orchestrations or even choirs. Not to say that this record doesn't have any of that, because that would be a lie. The record does have those elements. But I don't think any of those, or at least my perception listening to this record, is that those elements are not the main reason why the album sounds cinematic, theatrical, and epic. They're there to enhance it. They're there to kind of give it some flavor, give it some color to that sort of experience, to that sort of atmosphere. But to me, this album sounds cinematic, epic, theatrical, because the sound that it has, the drums, specifically the drums, the melodies of the guitars, and then the vocal performance, all of these three elements combined together to create that larger than life experience that the record has. And I thought that was super cool, because on one hand, it almost feels like you're listening to a stripped down version of a symphonic death metal record. It has that kind of ambiance to it, because you hear the drums, you hear the bass, you hear the guitars, the impact that the vocals have, and you see the size of the tracks growing. You see the bandwidth, the overall width of the tracks expanding because of these elements and because of them being pushed into the forefront and grabbing your attention immediately. Then you have the nuances, then you have the layers with some backing vocals, some choirs here and there, some orchestral elements, some symphonic elements, but they're not in the forefront. They're not driving the record. They're there to enhance the sound. They're an attribute to the sound. And I think that is a key element of how this whole album is put together and how this album sound-wise is presented. And it's incredible, difficult to do this and to still allow the album to, on one hand, feel straightforward, simple, basic, depending on these more core elements, and at the same time allowing it to have this larger than life experience to it. It's not easy to combine these very two different approaches and make them work. The production behind this album is phenomenal, and I think that is also a key factor on how this album sounds as good as it does. Because without the production, without the understanding of how you can create ebbs and flows, with how you can add those orchestral pieces, symphonic elements, to add ambiance to the songs, but not distort or not take you away from the core values of the band and of their sound, to me was fundamental for this album to sound as good as it does. And it sounds phenomenal top to bottom. If you like a record that has that old school approach as far as the impact, influence, and drive of the more core elements of the sound, this album is definitely for you. then if you enjoy that with that aroma that makes the album feel very cinematic, then for sure you gotta pick up this record. The album just has this way of navigating between these worlds, not just on a song-by-song basis, but within the same song. You'll have a track where the verses are very narrow, very natural, very organic, almost analog to a certain degree in terms of how the sound is presented. Then you get to the chorus and the track just blows up. The way they transition between one and the other is seamless. You see the layers appearing and you don't even realize how they're appearing. So great production that really enhances all of the great qualities of this album. And like I said, as far as sound is concerned, the two main core qualities and the two main core elements is definitely the drums and guitars. I thought the drum sound on this album was phenomenal. So much size, so much heaviness, so much power. Like I said, a lot of that cinematic drive, a lot of that cinematic experience really comes from the bombastic sound that the drums have. And as big and as heavy as they are, you never really feel like they're drowning everything else, either be the vocals or the guitars. You just feel like they're creating a much larger canvas so that the other elements can come in and do their part. And the guitars, for example, I enjoyed tremendously the more melodic side of this record. I think this album also feels very theatrical, very cinematic, very epic, because the guitar melodies on this album really rise to the surface. They're not drowned out by the drums, they're not drowned out by heavier guitar sounds. They just allow themselves to kind of levitate off the tracks, almost feel like they are there within the song, but almost a song of their own. And that aspect also adds a sense of darkness to this album, because this album is also very dark, not necessarily in the sound, but more so in how it feels. And those melodies really help create that dark experience that the album has. At the same time, it allows the songs to breathe because the melody really opens up the tracks. So it has two different ways of being perceived depending on where you are in the album and in the songs. Now, as far as the vocals are concerned, two things to say. First of all, super consistent performance, beginning to end. I love the vocal style. I love the harshness. I love the heaviness. Really adding an exclamation mark on every single song, and how the lyrics are delivered and the impact that those can have within the sonic experience around it. But I enjoyed tremendously the female vocals that are scattered throughout this record. It's a nuance, it's an add-on, it's not a driving force, it's not a main catalyst of the vocal performance on the album, but you have to admit, their inclusion in this record adds not only to the theatrical cinematic side of the album, but it also adds to that sense of darkness that the record has. Anytime you can add almost an angelic, pure element of sound or vocal performance to any song that has this sort of core elements, you're always going to bring some darkness to it. There is some darkness in beauty, and on this record, as far as the female vocals are concerned, there's definitely darkness within it. Now, overall, top to bottom, this is easily my favorite record from Nightfall. I would go as far as to say this is perhaps their best album to date. I know every band says that about their new album, but this album really checks all the boxes. This album is exactly what I want from a record like this, which is to give me the core elements that I'm going to see, hear, and feel live, which is have that guitar and drum predominantly driving the sound, using all the other pieces, either be orchestrational pieces, choirs, or symphonic elements, to add to that overall vibe, but not necessarily defining the vibe. This album feels a little bit more pushed back on that side, and I think that makes the record sound a lot better. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Lurking, opening with a very darkened sound, darkened riff, and then the vocals come in, and when the vocals come in, the song opens up, because the intro of this track is really narrow. But once the vocals come in, the sound opens up at the exact same time, and then you have this track that feels almost like a blackened rock and roll song, almost like a midnight track. The bass really helps this track as well, because it defines a lot of the darker experiences that the song has, and I felt like that was very important to create that underlying darkness within the song without depending on the drums or guitars, using those more to push the song forward, and using the bass in order to create a more a more linear ambiance to the overall track itself. It's a song that, because of that more narrow sound at times, specifically in the verses. It feels more compact, it feels more driven, and with a great melody overall in the chorus, really allows the chorus to levitate and jump off the track. It's a track that has a very memorable chorus, a very melodic chorus, a very open chorus, a complete different perspective, sound, experience from what you're getting in the verses, which is a very compact song. The transition between the two is very smooth, so it's not a track that jolts you from one to the other, but rather transitions in a smooth way, so you kind of growing with the song as it's moving from the verses into the chorus. It also has a great solo section, so it really feels like a track that's absolutely complete. Closing off on the chorus on repeat is a very old school way of constructing a track, so this track has a very well-known, well-rounded way of being put together. Next we have Inside My Head. This is easily my favorite song on the record. It's just a great track all around. It's a super melodic death metal song at heart. It really sounds that way, it feels that way, and it has that kind of drive and that kind of atmosphere to it. The drums sound phenomenal. The drums on this track really create two things: a sense of heaviness and also a sense of width. It makes the song a lot wider, and this gives room for the guitars and the melody within the guitars to move throughout that space, allowing the track to have that melodic death metal essence at its heart. The chorus is magnificent, both musically and vocally. It's a magnificent, super epic sounding chorus that just opens the doors, lets the sun in, the air comes in into the track. It just allows the track to feel so cinematic, so theatrical, so epic, and that chorus is that climatic point of the song. Every time it hits, you have to take a breath, you have to take a step back. It's a great track from that perspective. The chorus is very layered, vocally and musically, which also helps with the size and the epicness that it offers. Last but not least, for the Expelled Ones. This is a super dynamic song, very driven sound, very driven verses, bigger, more epic, more cinematic in the chorus. From that perspective, the structure or the approach reminds me of Inside My Head, and that is an approach that you're going to find throughout the album quite frequently. Now, it works because the songs are super melodic, the melodies in the songs are hooky, and then the chorus themselves are super hooky. So when you have those elements working really well for you, the design and the overall approach, even if it repeats itself, it doesn't sound repetitive. And this song is a perfect example of that. It's a track that has a heaviness to it, but still sounds larger than life. The heaviness of the track does not make the song collapse upon itself. It actually helps the song gain a little bit more of a robust nature to it. So it's a great track, great experience, very fluid, very engaging, great song all around. This is it, Nightfall, Children of Eve, out May 2nd on Season of Mist. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.